Michelle is coming on. Robert will be joining us in at least 30 minutes because right now he's picking up his children. So I'm going to get started with some housekeeping, okay? I hope you guys had a wonderful week. Now it's the ending. So I'm not sure if I should get started, if the new people that have joined us have any questions, or if I should start and questions will come on rolling in.
Since we only have an hour, we should just probably get started.
Okay, Sherry, would you like to say something?
I just have a question for people who are filling out their stuff for to go for the market the market elevate.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions I have is like, ask at the bottom, like, is this a speech? Is it a workshop? Is it a training? Is it whatever? Well, typically anything that I do a keynote on, I can also do a 2 hour, a half day, a full day on. So are you guys checking all of that? Or are you trying to do it separate? So, because it's one fee. So a keynote is a different fee from all those other things oftentimes. So how did you guys work that out when you were filling your stuff out?
Yeah, Sherry, I just did keynote, and then I figured, and I may just put something like workshops can be created from any of this, because I think otherwise it gets a little confusing.
Yeah, exactly. For example, Stephanie created her listings and she did only keynotes. But for example, for those of you who offer keynotes or workshops or coaching sessions, I would recommend creating them separately because they do have different prices.
And what this is Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
So what I'm trying to do, and I had a call with Victoria, and she knows that I was like totally confused.
Very overwhelmed.
Well, what I ended up doing is I wrote a sheet out for myself and put it and categorized that. And then I listed the things that I wanted in each one of those categories and just changed the title to suit, like a couple of keynotes, mostly workshops, consultations, coaching, something separate, so that there'll be a number of offerings. And so I'm coming in from a couple of different angles. And then the price points would, I can adapt those accordingly. Like one of my programs is really for an extended learning program. That's like 12 weeks. And I put it as price per participant, but it's really enterprise level, minimum 12 participants. So when somebody reads that, they'll know that it's more of an enterprise, and most of it is enterprise level work. But I'm pricing it out on the individual price point.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to see, I'm going to look at yours, Rob, and look at yours, Stephanie, just kind of see how you guys did it to see, because I was confused. I was like, almost everything that's a keynote of mine also is a half day or a full day can be developed into that. And I was like, well, you don't want to put it 3 times out there because that doesn't make sense. So I'll kind of look at yours, Robert, and see and Stephanie.
Well, and the confusing part is, if you want a keynote and you say, you brought in as a speaker, well, there's a little bit of a price differential there. That's a premium price. And then when you do a workshop, it's like, well, there's a multiple to that. And so there's a little bit of confusion there in terms of and I know there's a reluctance to put the number out there, but it has to be, you just have to go, okay, this is what it is. And we'll figure it out sort of like as the train starts to move out of the station.
Well, that was my struggle too, is because keynotes are always higher. People expect to pay a higher amount for a keynote. And so I was like, so I was very confused, but hopefully I'll go back and look at things and then come back in, kind of like what you did, Robert. And thank you for offering that.
And there's, sometimes like I did this 15-minute keynote. It was virtual for this group called Hacking HR. And it's more like a TED Talk style, short, crisp. And then there's, your keynote can be anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depending upon, there's price points all over the map for that. And then if you put that out as a full day workshop, in person, that's a whole nother price to then if you do a 2-hour, 90-minute or 2-hour virtual session or, a series of those virtual sessions. So it's,
right.
there's no
Okay,
easy answer.
perfect.
We'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Well, Alice says that she had a similar question, so that was good to answer. Okay. So before I get started with the 3.0, the marketplace, I just wanted to share. Let me share my screen a bit. Give me 1 sec. Okay, can you see my screen right now?
Yes,
So right now, Robert posted a job offering a few days ago for DEI speaker. So I just wanted to encourage everybody who meets the quality guidelines to come on here and apply. This is for a client that's a multinational in the construction sector. So I'm just going to send the link through the chat, and you guys can come on here and read a little bit more about the job. And if you feel that you meet the guidelines, please apply. Okay.
got it.
Perfect. So now
and,
that
and Victoria, just a quick question.
yes.
I'm sorry, Sandra had her hand up. Go ahead, Sandra.
You're on
What's the
mute.
difference between applying for this job through LinkedIn and what we are currently signed up as speakers for Elevate?
You're already in.
Mhm.
Sandra, you're already there.
No, I get it. So why would I apply for this if I'm already in here?
No, exactly. For example, you wouldn't have to apply. This is more like for the new people that are coming on. So for example, Ariel, Alice, Deborah. Okay.
So,
Victoria,
I'm
wait a
sorry.
minute. If a little context might be helpful here.
Okay.
So if we look at what happened with Structure Tone, which is a construction company, we pulled together a small team, Stephanie, Sabrina, myself, and Frank, to kind of brainstorm an approach to this particular issue. And there was some inappropriate behavior, some taunting. There was evidence of some really negative potential lawsuit type behavior within this company. They had tried some compliance approach to addressing it. It didn't go over very well. So they were looking for something that went over, that was going to be more, it was remedial. In other words, it was addressing something that happened, but a little bit more global, a little bit more invitational, preventative, and inspirational in terms of elevating people's thoughts about behavior. So with Frank had the most relatable and genuine sort of approach. So we went with Frank. What ended up happening was it really worked well. And I'll talk a little bit, Robert would like me to talk a little bit about my approach to presence and presentation. And I'll explain a little bit about what Frank and I did together. But the upshot was it was a very big success. Frank did 2 of these sessions, and they want more in the area of DEI. So that one company is looking for more, and we want to be able to offer them more. So that's the request for more folks in this area. And then Roberts is making a pretty big push to all construction companies, anywhere where there's a site, where there's potential for this type of behavior to happen, because we want to seize on the opportunity, the success, and build upon it. And I think there's a big upshot here for it. So that's a little bit of a snapshot. Any questions on that?
Yeah, well, I remain confused because if we already have a team of DEI speakers, why are we not using the DEI speakers we already have? Why are we putting, and are we going to do this for every topic? Because it seems like we treat DEI very differently in this space.
Yes.
In our last call, I believe we put our hands up, or Robert asked a question, do we want to invite more people in, or do we have enough? And I believe there was a general consensus that we don't have to limit it. So we're not looking at
but we
bringing in
haven't
100.
even, we have DEI speakers here who have not spoken for Elevate. So I was one of the people, and I agree. I don't think you have to limit the number of DEI speakers that we have, but this approach seems to be missing a step, right? Like we haven't actually exhausted the options we have currently.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just a little confused too. Like, are we, and does that mean that those of us who have been DEI speakers for Elevate who haven't spoken, are we applying for this, or are we already inserted into that because we're
You're already there. You're already there, Stephanie.
Okay.
So, and I think what Robert's thought is, I don't know exactly what his thinking is, but I'm thinking his thinking is he wants to bring more attention to this. And I don't think he's looking at bringing in 100 people. If he brings in one new person, I think that is a good thing. I think it's more of a bringing attention to the issue and to Elevate as being a platform. For everyone that's already here, your name is already on the list to offer, depending upon what that offer is. I think Structured Tone is interested in offering a series of sessions that will come from the folks that are already on this call right now. So if you have that 90-minute virtual session and we offer 6 of these to the client, and the client's going to look at them and go, this sounds interesting, or that sounds interesting. The folks that are here right now are getting the first opportunities to present to the client.
Okay, well, if you guys are okay with this, we can just leave this topic and wait till Robert gets back to see really what his approach is and
Yep.
what he's thinking, because it was his idea. So I just wanted to like introduce that, but he'll be on shortly and he will answer all of your questions. Okay?
Got it.
So I'll just get on with the marketplace. I know many of you have already been on here and have gotten creative and have surfed around all of the website, but I just wanted to remind you guys about how to do some things. It's not too complicated. For example, I've gotten emails asking me, how do I edit my profile? So when you sign in, you just hover over your image like this and you click on your profile. And it's very easy because below your image, you can click on edit profile and add all of the information that you'd like. Also, to create a new listing, on the right side of your picture, you click on expert start here. You select your category, let's say mental health, and then you add a title. We encourage that the title has great keywords, it's clear, it's simple, that when somebody reads this, they automatically understand what the listing is about, your price, and a detailed description. So we recommend adding here what this session is about, who is it directed to, what is this person going to get out of this session, the modality. For example, here you can also add how many people you would take on during the speaking session or the workshop, minimum 15 people, maximum 15 people. It's up to you. The running time. So for example, Robert
It's me.
said, oh, Victoria, I feel that I need 2 hours because 30 minutes just doesn't do it, 90 minutes doesn't do it, so I need 2 hours. So he requested it and I added it. If you guys find that there's something missing here, you can request it to me and we'll see if we add it. The delivery type, we eliminated expertise because we found that it was like implicit in all of these, but we added training. For example, one of our members, Gina Longo, asked for training because she didn't feel that these really like adapted to what she offers. Your location and an image. You guys are free to create your listings. You won't see post listing. You're going to see like submit for review, because after you submit it, we receive the notification, we review it, we polish it a little. If we find any errors, we correct them, and then we post them. So the good news is that we are almost up to 100 listings right now, and we've gotten 1,000 website visits this week. So we're very happy with this. We've gotten new members here, for example, Deborah, Ariel, Julian, I believe is over here. And another thing I would like to remind you guys about for your profile, well, I'm not a really good example, but for example, Sandra has a beautiful headshot image of herself on her profile. So I encourage you to, if it's possible, replicate or use a headshot similar to this. Okay. That's about it. I'm not sure if you guys have any questions. I'll also link my Calendly. So if you need support for your profile, for your listings, you can book a call with me right away, and I will help you with any questions that you may have. So I'm not sure if Rob, you would like to continue with presence and presentation.
Absolutely. Well,
Okay.
does anyone have any questions about that listing page?
I had a question. When we're making these, do we get to upload our profile pictures and everything, or do we send it to Victoria, or how does that work?
Yes, you can do it yourself. So that's why I explained here, you go into your profile. When you edit it, you are able to add, for example, your location, your phone number, your picture, and a small description here about you, a small bio. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
And if you want Victoria to help, she's a massively helpful. And if you send it to her, she'll work the magic too. So.
Okay, yeah, I'll send you a draft, Victoria.
Okay, perfect. No problem. Diane, I see you've got your hand up. Do you have any questions?
If we're doing something virtually, should we just still put our home city?
It's up to you. If you don't feel comfortable putting your home city, you can just leave that in blank.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Victoria, I have a quick question. Is it possible to put a video on the profile page?
It won't show. So what we're doing is adding YouTube links. That's why we uploaded to the Elevate Inspiration YouTube channel. But that's for the listing. So if you add a link to your profile page, it won't appear. It won't appear as it looks, you can see it on the listing. I'm not sure if you understand me.
Sure. Is it possible to add that functionality? Because when
I'll
I
see.
go to the great, because when I go to the other elevate.ac page, there's a really nice video that I created. I'd love to be able to put that up, and I don't know if anybody else would want to put up a video on their profile page, but it seems
Okay.
appropriate to do that.
Perfect. I'll check that out.
Thanks. So Robert wanted me to share with you a little bit about what I did with Frank and the offer out to the community as we begin to grow, and especially with this enterprise level offerings, whether it's virtual or in person. So with this program, with Structure Tone, which is the name of the company, this was an in-person session, 2 one-hour sessions in the client's office. They had created they found a room for us to deliver it in, and anywhere between 25 to 30 participants were to arrive. And so Robert asked me to just, would I be able to join Frank on site? So luckily my calendar cooperated. I was actually in downtown Boston that morning, and so I was able to meet Frank, and we were able to go over there together. But prior to that, it was at least a couple of weeks, I think. No, probably about a couple of weeks ahead. I worked with Frank. So my background is in theater and performing arts and storytelling. When I work with storytelling, I work in 3 different levels: the why, the how, the what of storytelling. The why is that stories are engaging, they're relatable, they're relevant, and they're memorable. They're easy to be retold. The how is the structure of a good story. not only the story that you tell, the individual story, but that also your story narrative, the story, let's say that the narrative and flow, the design flow of your presentation. And then to be a great storyteller, to be able to step in and be able to bring a story to life. And then the what is the right story for the right moment. So in all three of these I covered with Frank, and we started to talk about the relevancy. So we first explored how do you grab the attention. So let's put this into three sections. The first section was we had to talk about how are you going to grab the attention of the folks in the room and to be relatable, to be relevant. And just there's a certain magic with storytelling that, to start right away. And I love starting with the story. So Frank and I talked about all the different experiences he had as an NYPD officer and detective, the transformation that he made from going with the flow. In other words, not going against the grain, being called a rat, and, doing the way things always were done. Going against the thing inside of himself that he knew it wasn't quite right. We talked about this when we chose a couple of key moments that were most relevant to this group. And then we practiced it. We practiced, how are you going to tell the story? How are you going to bring it alive? What are the images? We worked on first person, present tense. We used sensory details, him looking out of the window, seeing the smoke billowing from the towers, being on the pile, passing the buckets back and forth. We all brought that to life and began to also weave through his narrative of when he was young as an officer, and then when the insights came, when he realized he didn't have to go along with the flow, he could actually make a choice, and that was the right thing to do, to trust his inner sense of values. So we first crafted that. And we looked at an hour of time, how much time he would need to do that. And then I offered to him, it's like, what are we going to do next? I've been doing these programs now for over 25 years, and I do a lot of story sharing, storytelling. And so we talked about doing a story sharing exercise. Very simple, getting two people to pair up with each other. One person shares a story, and we gave them something very specific. We talked about a couple of different types of stories, but the one we gave them was tell a time when you felt you went along with the flow and knew it was the wrong thing to do. Just that simple. And we talk a couple of minutes to share one side, then the other person shares. So it's back and forth. And then the third part of it was to introduce a tool set. And what Frank brought forward was the 4 agreements, something that he's used a lot. It's a solid framework. He actually printed up some posters. He created some takeaways for people that they could fit in their lunchbox. I thought that was really cool. And so that was the framework that we worked on. I worked with Frank from a presence perspective on his body language. I worked with him on his vocal cadence, his vocal presence, and engaging with his audience, being able to read the room. He's a natural speaker to begin with, but we worked on some things. And Frank, you can speak to that in a couple of minutes. Then we talked about the structure of the story sharing exercise and how to really deliver that so that it's clear, it's clean, it's engaging. And it was amazing to watch these pretty much, tough, rough and ready type of an audience that were managers, but they grew out of the construction industry, immediately engaged. I mean, it just blew the energy that came out of the room when they were talking to each other was enormous. And they actually even engaged in a conversation after that. It's sort of like it gets the blood flowing. Everyone starts to, wants to share their insights. And I think that's something that really locked the program in. And then when Frank introduced the 4 agreements, he did so with good examples and answered questions along the way of what those 4 agreements were. One of the areas that was, I think, critical when we got on site, we walked into well, first we were there, it was a 2:30 start. The client invited us to go in at 2 o'clock. Luckily, Frank and I had the presence of mind to go at 1 o'clock. So we went at 1 o'clock, walked into the building. They were there, they greeted us, they walked us into the room, and it was a glass room. I don't know how many of you have ever taught in a glass room before. I've taught in a glass room, and I take that flip chart paper and I cover the whole wall so that people can't see out. That wasn't going to happen here. So then they had tables, and it was their thought to put the tables out in the middle of the room and have everybody at tables. And I know from experience from years, you want to separate anything between you and your audience. So you don't want a table in between you. And so we worked together with them, very easily explained. We put the tables around the sides. We created really nice seating, more of a theater style seating. And we made sure we put the glass behind them so that they weren't looking out and getting distracted. So pretty simple principles, but I think sometimes when we get into the moment, we don't necessarily advocate for ourselves. I've learned how to advocate for myself because you're the speaker, you're presenting, you control the room. That's critical. And I'm sure you've all have your experiences when that didn't happen. Bill and Bob, I'm sure from years of doing this stuff, you have tons of stories when it just like went sideways, when you went along with stuff. I learned not to go along with it and say, if you want something to really work, Sherry, I'm sure you're the same way. You walk into these situations, it's just like, the person really doesn't get how to create that sense of intimacy and connection. And that ultimately, it was what we were selling. We were selling intimacy. We were selling connection. We were selling understanding. And that's what came across. Hi, Robert. So that's the piece. That's a huge piece of the puzzle. It's crafting the story arc, the design arc. It's making sure that your story is you're bringing it to life as clean, as crisp, and as clear as possible. You're putting clear images in people's minds. You should have seen them. It was totally relatable. They were fully in to the story, especially when Frank was talking about 9/11, because many of the folks in the room knew people that were in the building at the time because they were part of the construction group they were there. So it was alive for them. And then I think not being afraid to actively get the audience involved. And the story sharing is the simplest, cleanest, easiest way to get energy in the room around a particular topic. And they shared, I don't know about you, I used to do customer service work. And one of my favorite things to do was to, share the best customer service story you ever had and the worst. People love to tell horror stories, right? So it's just, that's a thing that you can take away from it. But one of the goals that we want to have here is when, not if, when your program gets selected, whether it's in person or virtually, we want to make sure that the quality is crisp, that if the room setup is right or the virtual presence is really crisp, that the story arc is created, that you feel confident, that all of the technology, if it's virtual, it's crisp and it's clear. And what can go wrong will go wrong, and you make sure you create all the things that'll help make it go smoothly, especially in the view of the client. And what was really great was the client was involved in this session. Really interesting. She came up to us afterwards and said, personally, the story sharing was powerful for her. She shared a story of being out with a group of construction workers. And one of the fellas said, hey, let's see if we can have a game and guess the nationality of the waitress. And inside of her, she was also went, ugh, she just collapsed inside of herself, but she went along with it. And she said, I'll never do that again. So for her, she totally got it. And then there was a senior leader, senior VP in the room as well. So Frank and I played off each other nicely. I saw him, he was standing up. I knew he was going to be there. I went and introduced myself to him and made a really good, strong connection with him. And it's always about not just go do the program and leave, but you go do the program and then you build the relationship with the client, because that's where it all begins. Any thoughts, questions? Frank, do you have any insights or you want to share from the experience?
It's a perfect segue for me to jump in. Thanks, Rob. But anybody else? Frank, would you like to say a few words? John, do you have a question?
There's only three things I'd like to just, say in regards to what Rob just went over. And one of them is exactly like he said, knowing the room that you're going into. It's setting up that environment. Without Rob's help, I wouldn't have been able to set up that environment because my knowledge wasn't there. And also, Robert, you remember, I asked the client numerous times, can you send me a picture of the room so that we know what we're dealing with? And we never got a picture of the room. So still, we were walking in blind. So, and that's why it's critical to have at least an idea of what the room could be. And then my idea would be is what's the worst possibility of that room? And then how do I put it into what I need to make this talk a 100% positive? And I think that is, one of the key things is checking out that room and making sure that you can get in there to do what you need to do earlier. This way you're all set up, and then you can actually take the time like I did with Rob and just take the time for yourself to bring yourself down to the moment so you can engage everybody in. And Robert, I know you just joined in, so I'll just be quiet from there, and it's all you.
Actually, I want to just follow up on one thing. The client made notes about what she thought were some things that could be included. I did the same thing, and it was amazing to share those afterwards. And we had the same notes, and so that was really good connection, client connection, always reinforcing and being in agreement of what's going to land well with with that particular group.
All righty. Thanks for your patience. It's great to see some new faces. Orly, lovely to see you. It's great to see you, Deborah, Ryan again, Ariel, Mukesh, hi. Diane, thanks very much for joining us, and my apologies for being a few minutes late. It's a school run issue, bit of a family emergency, but we're all there. If there are any specific questions, Victoria, or shall I just dive in with my updates?
Well, are you going to talk about the RFP?
Shall I talk about the RFP?
Yeah, and the LinkedIn job post.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And Robert, just a quick insight that there was some question about why the call for speakers on that particular topic, and so just if you could address that, that would be important.
Yeah, so I think that we've already put forward our response for that particular RFP. So RFP, request for proposal. We had a client that requires diversity and equity inclusion speakers for workshops that are going to be 90 minutes virtual, just to repeat if it's already been repeated, on camera mandatory, meaning that the 25 or so in the audience are going to be on camera, and a workshop of around 90 minutes, which obviously being a workshop is going to require some interactivity and work on, bi-directional rather than simply just listening. I put a call out because I think there's no harm in us continuing to stimulate the supply or providers of expertise, as well as responding to these kinds of opportunities. This isn't one workshop of 90 minutes. It's probably 20 plus. The pilots are going to be starting in July, and they're going to take each issue in turn in this particular client organization. So they're going to be taking issues around microaggression, issues around generational bullying, LGBTQ+, and so on, kind of one at a time. And there are two sort of particular reasons to this. And this is why the answer to that question is, you know, we have nearly 1,000 visits a week this week to elevate the market. And they're all coming from people who want services such as this. So there's the more we can proliferate and granularize some of these areas around diversity, sustainability, mental health, and empathic leadership, the better. That's 300% up week on week. If we can keep going on that, that'll be quite spectacular. We've got, I think Victoria just told you, just under 100 listings. So the eyeballs are coming, and the more that we can case study these kind of success stories that Rob and Frank have just been talking about, the better. How the RFP went down, we had an acknowledgement from client, and they effectively simply have a link to your listings. And those listings are in order of your kind of arrival on site for a sort of what do we call it, equity and fairness. And we now have to wait 10 days, 2 weeks or so for some kind of a response about how they want to start. I think they represent organizations across the United States, particularly, that all require this leadership approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, empathy, sustainability, and mental health. And I believe that, as we have done, and as Rob just alluded to, we can proliferate within an organization, and our expertise in enterprise sales is using all of those case studies to begin to have conversations with other organizations. So that's happening a lot. I think one of the differentiators for you guys to really understand is we're not pitching event planners. We're not pitching conferences for keynote speeches. We're talking directly to enterprise, and we're stimulating demand fresh from their own approaches to their own internal strategy. So I'll come to you just a second, Diane. So the internal strategy, I think, is being stimulated by their need, virtually or in the room, to begin to explain these really important topics. I think we're doing some good. It's part of the reason that I established this business, for those of you who haven't seen me before. I think there are some real home truths, and all of the information that you provide is badly needed. There very definitely is a need, and it's my job to connect the providers with the enterprises. Diane, you had a question.
John had his hand up first.
I saw that, John. I've asked you a couple of times. Do you want to, is that hand up for exercise, or do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm very new to the group, so I'm just mindful of protocols and what have you.
Go for
it. This was relating more to the previous, to Victoria's speaking. So I get at all the topics that we're discussing, but that's not my bag. I'm in business, sales management, franchising, and all that boring stuff. And I couldn't find any listings for the appropriate categories, Victoria. So yes, there's leadership. Yes, there's diversion, inclusivity, but there was nothing related to my core expertise. So am I in the right group? If so, I think the listings need to be amended, or something has to happen so that what I talk about is picked up by whoever might be watching.
Yeah, so I can talk to that. So there are two things. As soon as we have a small cluster or a critical mass, which we have, John, now, because we have several people who've listed in sales and management and so forth, there'll be an additional category title on the left-hand side. And each time anybody lists, we're using the keywords in your title as search engine optimization keywords. So you're in by default. That's why we've got sort of anything else as the bucket to catch those. And as soon as we reach a cluster, say 3 listings within that particular area, they'll go live. So by this time next week, you'll have that separate section. Is that okay?
Yeah, just one follow up to that, because I've sent Victoria, I don't know, 20 or 30 invitations from people I know in the space, and that was some of the feedback they gave me. They said, you know, their topic wasn't listed in the main categories, just so you know that.
Well, perhaps we'll have to try and see if we can get ahead of that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, we've grown by sort of 30% in a week, so certainly something that I'll look to try and address next week, John. I appreciate that. It's great to see that you're introducing people along, and we've got your confidence on that. Diane.
Lovely to meet you, Robert. I would probably do a ditto on that, because my skill, I'm on business skills, communication, networking,
Perfect.
You know, that type of a thing is kind of my superpower. And that's kind of where I can bring in skills. Where I can also help with the DEI is that if you do not have a diversified network, companies are at risk. And so there's a fair amount of research here in the States about how diversity really impacts the bottom line. And so if you don't have that research, you know, let me know. I can dig up some things, but there's a fair amount that says if you have diversity on the board perspective, particularly, or other things, companies are going to be more profitable. You're going to reduce churn. So these are really bottom line topics of conversations for businesses these days. There's an organization, Robert may know it, here in Boston area called the Boston Club. And it is specifically for getting women on boards and people of diversity on boards. It's mainly women, but diversity falls into that as well. And they just came out with a recent report on this. So.
Well, that's great. And
Thanks.
Always my ears are wide open for any of those kind of practical case studies on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you. I think one of the key things at the moment is, I'll come to you in just a sec, Sherry. One of the key things at the moment is we are contacting thousands of diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals as one of the fastest growing professions amongst these kind of organizations to offer out our services. But I think that it's that sort of 360 within sustainability, empathic leadership, mental health, and so forth, which they're all looking for either directly or indirectly. But actually, for all of you to be able to emphasize the problems that do exist and the commercial risk, which maybe Rob and Frank spoke to, the commercial risk that exists if you don't. There's great commercial benefit, but also a very substantial commercial risk by not incorporating diversity. Sherry.
Yeah, so what I heard you say just a second ago was like, we're really not, you know, looking like putting our services out there for keynotes. So my question to you would be, should we not list, like maybe have one listing as a keynote and the rest of them more focused on other areas, since it's really not something that people are going to be looking for?
So keynotes, let me rephrase that. So keynotes, I guess the majority of keynotes are organized by enterprise. So we want to be a source of keynote opportunities, but our call out is rather than to the event planner or the venue, it's the chief human resources officer, chief marketing officer, and those are the key kind of roles that we're targeting. When they actually think about, when you think about keynote, in my view, a keynote could be, Ryan, I'll come to you in just a sec. The keynote could be now rather kind of metamorphically different from what it was 2 years ago. So they might want you for a 90-minute sort of keynote meets Q&A online. Really what I think these listings are conversation starters in a sense. The fact that you've sort of set out your stall is a really key point. And the more detail that you can commit to those listings, the better they're going to be. You know,
Okay.
with 1,000 visits a week, it's you know, a great start where we've got 50, 60 of you listed. It's growing very, very quickly, but what they're looking for is quality. So, you know, we're trying to manage quality as much as we possibly can. Ultimately, it's your prerogative, Ryan.
Is this new RFP, is that the same company that out of Boston as before, or a different one?
Well, the one out of Boston is the first one. I have several more. So yeah, I mean, we've got a couple more coming through next week.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I think there's an interesting crossover between DEI and sustainability that doesn't often get highlighted. So yeah, I'm interested to kind of learn more about how we can kind of, as an Elevate group, like feed into the expansion of these definitions that organizations are carrying within DEI or within sustainability or within empathic leadership, to see how we could even move the needle on industry terminology and what's being used, because I think that's really important to expand the definition about how you can't actually be diverse, equitable, and inclusive without incorporating sustainable measures into economies and vice versa. So
perfect. It leads me on to a really, really, really important point. If everybody can just come with me on this one for a minute, because actually, Ryan, you're quite right. This organization is a 10,000 person, 1 billion plus national / multinational, in the sense that they have business in the United Kingdom and Ireland as the 51st and 52nd states or something. And they are really, the conversation with me, Ryan, was, you know, DEI, unconscious bias, those kind of areas, topic headers around DEI were their sort of starters. Then the conversation, if I had several with this particular senior vice president of HR, came to this. Look, we lost 30% of our leadership group and our management team over the last 3 years. They've now been churned into a sort of new era. And for them, it's about more than a paycheck. So really, she's looking for, it's not a carte blanche for us to say, here's a list, but she can see the list. There are 97 listings now on Elevate in terms, and pick and choose from those, because specifically what those people are, what are they? She said 27 to 35, they're new arrivals, they're graduates, they're excited, they've joined, and as you know, Ryan, because this comes up a lot, they've joined because they care about this organization. They realize that the organization is, you know, quote unquote, more than a paycheck. So they will have been asking, as it's a sort of seller's market, they will have been asking, what are your DEI credentials? What are your sustainability credentials? What is the opportunity here for me as a new employee? And I think she's very, very conscious that she wants to retain these people. So empathic leadership obviously is part of that. Sustainability is part of that. Mental health is part of that. And, you know, to your point, John, general concepts of management skills and traditional management skills are also that. What I think she wants personally, we say fortnightly, you say once every 2 weeks, organized workshops of say 90 minutes to bring that virtual tribe together of her new employees and to talk about things that show that they care as an organization. So my job as enterprise sales guy is to get 20 over the line, or 30 or 40 over the line at $2,500 to $5,000, shall we say, but I haven't quoted yet. They're more interested in that content. And that's easier for me to transact because they reflect exactly the mood of these large scale 1,000 plus staffing organizations in the States. So as soon as we've got one, as we have done, we've started to crack open that door. So I think what you're talking about, Ryan, is just as applicable. It's like stimulate the mind, bring the tribe together, do things that are thoughtful and compelling during that 90-minute time, learn something new, you know, as well as the key skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, really what I think this integrative approach is it just bringing humanity back into organizations because
Right.
the culture has become mechanized. So like, how do you actually reinfuse the simplicity of what it means to be human into the functionality of how an organization works?
Perfect. And Victoria's just taken that down verbatim. So we'll use that as part of our approach back to enterprise.
Yeah.
You talk
Cool.
very eloquently, Ryan, and it's perfectly encapsulates what this is really about. It's like the zeitgeist or whatever of what we are, where we are now. And it's nice. It's quite, it's not sort of progressive as it is to, you know, radically progressive. It's moving back to values that really are incredibly important and sensible in organizations.
Yeah.
Take care, Stephanie. I'm so
Which is
sorry, I
actually-
ramble on, and here we are 1 hour later. So if you need to go, just jump, and if you'd like to stay on for a few minutes, please feel free.
Robert, I have to run. Good to see you all.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Cheers.
Sherry, does that sort of cover some of the grounds we were talking about? And
I just want to know the best way to market, like market myself within this group, right? So, you know, I'm both a keynote speaker and do a lot of trainings and coaching because if you're a speaker, you know, you have to have multiple streams or it just won't work. So in this particular thing, you know, it seems like what I'm hearing from you is it's probably more profitable to go along the idea of workshops, trainings, coaching, consultations versus keynotes. So when somebody's looking at something going into Elevate, they're not really searching for that keynote speaker as much as they're searching for these other things.
We are bidding against keynote as a keyword. Because
oh, we are, okay.
We are, yeah. But actually what I've kept speaking sort of rather broad because I think that speaking encapsulates virtual and actual, and actually the length and time and so forth, and the definition of that really is quite broad. It could be sort of town hall, it could be high school, it could be 5,000 people in a conference. So we've got you covered one way or the other. I want to say we've got you covered, Sherry, and we want
the title. So maybe what I should be hearing is the title's more important than exactly what you're putting down at the bottom. The title is what you think is the most important.
I absolutely think that's correct. So for example, Sandra's listed intersectionality, unconscious bias. Those two things are therefore search engine optimized for her. So it's automatically the actual keywords.
Okay.
Bill.
Very quick, as people join us, I think we should make it really clear that the profile that you put out there and the title of your presentation or whatever it is you're doing is yours. And that this is a pull situation. The clients are going to look at all of us and say, oh, that one's interesting. And I don't think it's a question of Robert going out and saying, oh, you want so-and-so. He's not pushing us. He's waiting for the client to pull us. And it's really our responsibility to, as you said, Sherry, to have a great title, something that intrigues them, and a great description. So work on that description of what you've put out there.
I think that's a great point. And I think, well, it's not my responsibility to, it's not my place. It's certainly my responsibility. it's my responsibility to stimulate demand on behalf of enterprise, initially in the United States and the United Kingdom. And I will talk to them again and again and again about what they want and broaden that view, but it has to be their ultimate choice. Right. And so literally what you list is absolutely critical. Some of you, you'll notice if you look around those listings, have really high quality YouTube, and we can help you with some pointers on that in terms of how that works. But that really is kind of try before you buy, isn't it? It's kind of like, the equivalent of a sort of sample almost. So I think that's, the better that you can present yourselves photographically in a description and all the rest of it is absolutely critical. Hey, Orly. You going to say hi?
I am. I had to unmute myself. I've been here listening. I am really glad we met in person in Copenhagen.
We did meet in person. You were on the way to float in the Dead Sea, I think I remember. And
it was awesome. Yeah, I just came back.
Those of you who don't know, we have this kind of weekly who's in the most exotic spot. We had the live pictures of the Antarctic a few weeks ago. Yes. Was it Baja California, Mexico, all sorts of fun things. Orly's got an interesting story and has actually been part of working in coaching speakers, Sherry, particularly in terms of sort of coaching for sales and so forth. So we'll learn a bit more with Orly as we go over the coming weeks. Will we? Should we leave it at that?
If you'd like, yeah,
It would be nice to, because we've sort of hit the end of the hour. It'd be
yes,
nice
we are.
To get some more, a good sort of 20-minute introduction with you, Orly, in terms of what you offer and what you're bringing to the party, which I think is really fabulous.
Awesome. And I know Diane Darling, she's amazing. It's so funny that we reconnected here, but we haven't seen each other in forever. So it's fun to see a friendly face. I feel like in America, we have, Cheers on TV, and it used to be a show where Norm would come in and everybody goes, Norm. So it's kind of fun to see a friendly face. Thank you.
And Cheers is like 5 minutes from here. So I got to scoot to my day job, everybody. Lovely to see you all and meet you. It's such a warm, friendly group. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Frank, let's grab a call. Everybody, let's grab a call.
Deborah, great to see you. Diane, thanks for coming. Mukesh, thanks for coming. Take care, everybody, and hopefully see you next Friday.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you
nice
now.
meeting you.